You are listening to South Niagara Conversations, a podcast presented by the South Niagara Chambers of Commerce, along with 105.1 The River and 101.1 More FM. Here are your hosts, Dolores Fabiano and Scott Lunn.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks to all of you who've joined us for our South Niagara Conversation series. Joining me is my co-host, Scott Lunn, General Manager of 105.1 The River and 101.1 More FM. I got it perfect this morning, Scott.
Good morning, Dolores. You nailed it. We can stop now. That's good. We got it. Well done.
Fantastic. How are you doing this morning?
I'm doing very, very well. I'm working in the office today. So how's that for today's topic? But I'm doing very well.
All right. I also want to give a shout out to our tech sponsor, Brian LaChapelle from B4 Networks. Brian and his team do an amazing job of making us sound so great all the time. Brian, how are you this morning?
Fantastic, Dolores. Thanks.
Great. We're all trying to keep warm on this yet another wintry, snowy day in South Niagara. I have to admit, I kind of love it. I'm one of the few, but I'm still into the snow so far. So this morning, we're going to talk about the transition that many of us had to make to working from home. Some of us were already working from home, but many of us had to quickly make that shift literally overnight. It's a very different landscape. It takes a little getting used to, and it becomes that much more difficult when there's multiple people working out of the same home and of different ages. So let's get to it. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. Scott, who do we have joining us this morning?
Well, Dolores, we've got Mike Cressman from the Cressman Agency with us this morning, as well as Carolyn Mullin, who's the Associate Director of Strategic Partnerships at Niagara College, and McCabe with Trusted Time. Welcome, everyone, and thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Good morning.
We'll get things started off. I guess with Mike and Lou now, as I understand it, both of you worked home prior to the pandemic anyway, but now the folks you're talking to, clients and everyone, are also working from home. So how has that environment, the setup, changed your world? Lou, maybe we'll start with you.
For me, it was more managing my clients, right? What because we are an HR company, what typically has been happening is clients have quickly realized they've had to change their business strategy. So long-term strategies have become short-term strategies. What does that look like? What's been affected? What hasn't been affected? But more importantly, they've had to change to be an adaptive leader. Where the old days of seeing as believing is no longer, right? So the question really is posed is, if you trusted them before, why not now? And we found that employees that were never engaged, this is where it really comes out, that they were never engaged, and employees that were engaged, typically their productivity increases because there's no travel time. But then we find that we get hiccups with the leaders, right? Because they don't know how to manage that. And they're struggling with aligning their HR strategy with their business strategy. So then, we come in and try and help with the psychological contracts that are happening. The unspoken expected terms we originally had have now changed. And what does that look like? And how do we influence that?
Wow. Yeah, that's a pretty significant shift. Mike, how about you?
Yeah, so I mean, we've never really set up shop in one place because we're pretty mobile. The businesses that we work with are spread out all over, and we're usually out and about seeing them. So although in a traditional sense, we've never gathered at a one place, one office. The last year it has been dramatically different for me. I'm usually, my day consists of going from spot to spot and seeing different people and talking to different people. And all of that now is being done, through Zoom calls or over the phone. And it's just not the same, right? You don't have that same interaction. And in many ways it was something that I had to figure out how to kind of find that new balance. When you go see somebody and you sit with them, maybe you're there for an hour and you talk business for 35 minutes of that hour, and 25 minutes is just hanging out kind of thing, right? So I've found that these Zoom calls and just regular calls, we're really just we're talking business and we're moving on, and that for me has been one of the biggest changes, right? So far more productive in some ways, because I'm not wasting as much of my day just kind of, but for me personally, I really miss that, right? I miss talking about whatever their vacation was, and so yeah, it's been a big change. I joke, Scott, we're doing some work with your group, and I joked on one of our calls that I'll probably bug you guys because I get lonely sitting here, and you don't have those same interactions, right? So yeah, it's been a big change, and it's been a big change. People wouldn't necessarily think that because I don't have a traditional office setting, but it in the last year, we've had to figure out how to do things differently and try to find the same enjoyment in our work in a much different way.
Mike, you and I have had this conversation many, many times. I think because we're both so lonely, we call each other and have these conversations. But, pros and cons for sure. Like I think about the Zoom meetings, and it's all about balance, right? So you're saving the travel time, and you're right. There's no chit chat before, and there's no real chit chat afterwards. There might be a little bit, but not to the extent that we used to have. And so, when you have an hour meeting, it's truly an hour meeting. And I have found, the pro of that is that I have so much more time to get to my real work. Pre-COVID, when I was in the office and you had time for the chit chat and all of that good stuff, feel good stuff, there weren't enough hours in a day to get anything done. And, most weekends I was working because I had to get caught up. I'm finding that I have a better balance now. And because I am working from home, if I want to work, late a couple nights a week, because it's easy because I'm at home, I'm not working on the weekends, which is also a pro. The con is that you just don't have that connectivity, right? It's just not the same thing. And I think for my work, understanding what people are doing and being able to make connections, you lose that by not having that time in person to connect. Carolyn, how are you finding it? Because you went from working, Niagara College, pretty big employer, fast paced, lots of people every day. And now you are, or have been, at home.
Yeah,
how's
right.
that going?
Yeah, so very, very similar to you, Dolores. I would, my family would text me at a certain time and say, "We're starting dinner now, ... or "The grill is heating up, ... In other words, come home, woman, and be fed," right? Because we want to be fed too. So yeah, so I would and work into the evenings, and so I'm one of the senior managers in our division. We have anywhere between 24 and 30 staff on 2 campuses usually. So sort of handling all those relationships and the hallway talk, right? And the conversations, the nuances that go on, all of that has now disappeared. So I'm more productive into my hours during the day. But I've onboarded a new staff member. She started just before Christmas. And so because of that, like as I'm talking to you right now, my chat, so I'll say in Niagara College, we've got all this amazing infrastructure in place. We have MS Teams, right? So we have different ways of communicating with each other instantly, but I'm being instantly communicated with that way all the time, right? Because I've said anything you need at any time, right? So that has, within the work hours has sort of disappeared in that sense. So I'm being more productive during the day, during the week. I don't have to do as much at night, and I don't do as much during the evening, but I feel responsible, and I feel I need to be open to those communications whenever they happen, right? Because we are missing that otherwise. In our team environment, We did a lot of in-person fun stuff. We work hard, but we also, we have grilled cheese contests. We have potlucks, right? So all of that, that we're really truly missing that. And looking at each other in squares is the way we connect. So in the beginning, yes, to Mike's point, the Zoom meetings were very much business, but we've started to slide a little bit now again and spend those few minutes. How are you, right? Or we'll book a meeting that's an hour and 15 minutes or an hour and a half, just because we know we need to have those conversations and get caught up with each other before we get to the business.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. My daughter works for a company. It's a tech company, and they've got about 100 employees, and they all work from home. Not anything new. They just all work from home. But every morning at 10 o'clock, they have a staff meeting, and it's really to engage in that water cooler talk. And so, they talk about, what'd you do last night? Anybody watch anything good? Oh, did anybody hear about this? And just that conversation that you would have. And, it might sound like, oh my God, what a waste of time. Like, get on with your work. But no, that kind of sets your tone, right? Like you have the chit chat, and then you're able to get to your work, and you're still feeling good about the work that you do. They found some really creative ways of keeping everybody engaged and feeling like a team still, right? So I think if you're part of a big team where you've got lots of employees, I think that's something that you have to figure out, because it really does affect morale as well. I find that with myself, the fact that I have an office where I can close my door makes a big difference. And just before we went live, we were chatting a little bit about, many of you have children at home that have been at home, doing their school studies and whatnot. My kids are older, so we have my husband who's been working from home, and sometimes that's a whole different issue, and my daughter who's in university, so she's pretty self-sufficient. But for those of you with young kids at home, how have you been managing that? Because it just blows my mind. I'm so grateful I'm not in that position, to be honest.
Well, for me, I have my daughter at home, and I have, homeschooled. And the reason why is I was genuinely concerned about downtime, right? It's setting the expectations. The schools could never set the expectations when they'd be shut, if the numbers went up and whatever. So what I did for my business is I had my staff bring their children as well, and we had a homeschool here. We hired a tutor. So my staff would never have downtime, because then I'm not worried about, with the infectious disease leave, anybody, now they've added the component, as long as you're afraid, you can stay home. Or if you're afraid for your child, you're still covered. But businesses can't afford that, right? I mean, what do you do then if you're a small to medium-sized business, and now, you have 5 people with kids, and they all decide, I don't want to come to work, I'll take the 55% I'm given. Because quite frankly, or even at CERB at one point, right? But because quite frankly, this is easier than trying to juggle everything. And I think that it's really setting the expectations. So I have a daughter at home, and I'm hoping, I'm knocking on wood, that she doesn't, make a liar out of me. But we've come into this routine of expectations, right? Hey, Abby, I'm on this call from 9 to 10:30. There's no way you can disturb me from this period to this period. Or she would do the same with me, because now they're all into this Zoom and these Google Meets, and there's certain things I just shouldn't interrupt, right? Like, playing a game, or something so important. But I think that expectations, honestly, is where we're at. And I think that because the environment has changed so much, for businesses more particularly, new expectations have to be set. A new trust agreement has to be set on what this is going to look like, so that you can measure it. Otherwise, it's throwing mud and seeing what sticks, right? And then it gets more chaotic.
Yeah. Mike, how are you managing? I know you've got your 2 little ones. Well, they're not so little anymore, are they?
No, they're not. So 12 and 9, and so my wife Leanne has been home through this whole experience as well. And it's funny, because you talked about having an office that you can close the door. So I have a dedicated space, and we have a lovely home, but most homes aren't set up to have two offices.
Yeah, you're right.
So,
Yeah.
we have 3 bedrooms upstairs, and we have two girls, and so Leanne has set up a workspace in our bedroom. We're lucky enough that the bedroom's big enough to do that, but so the girls, much like Lou was saying, like creating expectations and saying, like I've got a call here, and mom's got a call there, and like we want to help, and we're here to help you guys during the day, but we also have to get our work done, right? So we're lucky that they were old enough, mature enough, I guess, at 12 and 9 to kind of understand that, and then I'm lucky that it's that we have 2 girls, and they always bug mom first.
Yeah.
So
Lucky you.
yeah, so I was able to kind of, but it was funny how it evolved, right? Like, initially, especially Ali, our 9-year-old, like she just didn't get it. Like she needs to be in school. She needs that structure. Lauren, our 12-year-old, is we joke is either going to be a millionaire or in jail, one of the two. And she thrived in it. But Ali needed us checking in on her, especially in the beginning. And then, this last month or so, she was the one putting a note on her door to not come in because she was on a call kind of thing. So, yeah, like just like everybody, you just kind of have to figure it out, right? We're creating workspaces where we don't necessarily have workspaces, and you're trying to support them because you want to make sure that they're not falling behind, I guess, right? That they're getting the education that they need. But neither of us are teachers.
Yeah.
and we're still trying to kind of find our way through the day. So it was a delicate balance. We were both excited when it was time for them to go back, not for anything other than just some normality for them and some structure, like that I never thought I'd be the one saying these sorts of things, but that structure it's important to all of us. The energy that came through that door the first day they came home was spectacular, right? Like the energy in the whole house was different. They just there was an unofficial ending to the day for them again, as opposed to being at home, right? The bell rang at 3:30 and the day was done. So there was some definition there. So yeah, it's just like everybody, just trying to figure it out, right? And some days were good, and some days it was well, you know what? Go play in the snow. We'll get you a tutor next year if we need to, because we've got some stuff we've got to get done work-wise, and it's just not going well today. So just go have some fun, kind of thing, right? So.
Yeah, I think it's making people understand too that you're working, you're at home, but you are working.
Yeah.
I found that with my 80-year-old parents, they would call, and during the day, like I'm in my office, I'm focused. My husband, we're lucky enough that we were able to, one of the spare bedrooms, make an office for him. My daughter's in a room, so everybody's busy. And they would call the home phone, and I would, kill myself to answer the phone because it's my parents. They're 80 years old. Oh my God, what's going on? Oh, hi, what are you doing? We're making some, lasagna for dinner. Do you want some? It's like, I'm working, Mom. Like I'm at work. Oh, aren't you at home? Yes, but I am working. So what I had to do was tell them, okay, during the day, we're all working, so we're not going to answer the home phone. So if you need to reach me, if it's really important, call my cell. And for them, they think that every time they call my cell, I get charged, which I'm not going to tell them the truth. But so they will not call my cell unless it's absolutely important. So I had to do that in order to help them realize, okay, like you can't be just calling me to chit chat or ask me if I want to come over for an espresso during the day. Like I just can't do that. Now, Carolyn, I don't remember, how old are your kids?
Oh, yeah. So there's 4 of us in a bungalow right now. The only one, Bernie, had gone into a home-based business before all of this started. So Bernie has the office and had the office and was the only one home during the day, right? So my girls are actually this year both in university, one in first year. So I'm not really sure how she's doing biological sciences in our basement, but she is. She's in the basement, first year university. And our oldest is fourth year. So she's going to graduate from Brock University this year. So last year, Tess missed out her graduation and prom, all that sort of stuff, right? This coming up year, I don't know what graduation ceremonies are going to look like for Alex, but she's, graduating fourth year from Brock. And so I am sitting in the living room in the best available Wi-Fi spot, right? So my office is wherever I can connect. We ended up, we didn't know this at the beginning, but we have plaster walls. Our house is old enough to have plaster walls. The Wi-Fi signal doesn't like going through certain materials, plaster being one of them. So we've had to figure out the extenders, right? There's actually an extender plugged into one of our bathrooms because that helps one of the girls with where their space is, right? So everyone, to us, I can work around that, the girls with their university, because of anxiety, because of stress, because of all these things, right? That's built up to, if you recall back to being, in your high school years, graduating, making your decisions about post-secondary, making your, right? And all this sort of stuff. So it's, thank goodness we all get along really well. We love spending time together because, as I think it was Mike said, it's been 10 months of family day, right? Yeah, so it's been strange, but to your point regarding parents and understanding work time. So we got rid of our landline at the beginning of all of this. We had kind of been talking about it for quite a while. We informed all of our family. We had bought my 82-year-old dad a cell phone when he turned 80, just because we have a cottage, we go back and forth. We want to make sure he's safe. So at first, for a little while, without the landline, there wasn't, he didn't figure that out. But then with he's figured out texting. So he texts puns to my girls. He texts, and so they have a little pun exchange, right? But he also lives here. I live in Font Hill, and he lives 1.3 kilometers away. That's a good walking distance for someone who's had a knee replacement and who needs to get back on the right. So I will see my dad. I'm looking out my living room window right now, and I'll see him walking by, and then I'll hear a bang bang at the door, right? 10 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, right?
Mm-hmm.
But he I know you're working, but I just and he's made brownies, yay, like right, little kind of treat. But then there are also the times when he'll call the cell and he'll say, "Oh, I got this letter. I don't know what to do. Can I come over?" Right? Yeah. And so I'm not going to say no. Yeah, okay, that's fine, Dad. Right? So and then we'll stand on the on the front porch, and he'll show me this letter, and of course, do I need to visit this bank? Is it a scam? Is it? And he's all worked up, and I'm just calmed, right? So we work through whatever it is and get on with our day. So it's an adventure every day, right?
Every day. You made a good point about, the internet and connectivity. And, we've been hearing a lot through our Canadian Chamber about the digital divide. And it's interesting because when this first, started last March, where we were all, starting to work from home, the majority of calls that we received from our members were about the internet. That, is anybody else having problems? And some were in rural areas where they just couldn't get internet. And, we actually opened up one of our chamber offices to members, because in that particular community, a number of our members were driving around looking for free Wi-Fi just so that they could work. And so, imagine the stress of having to lug all your files and, your computer and everything home, and then not being able to connect. So we made our office available, and, they had to book time. And so, we only so many people in the office, physically distanced, all of that stuff. But if we hadn't done that, they wouldn't have been able to continue to work. And then we had some members who called whose own internet plan was sufficient when they were, watching Netflix or, on the iPad. But now you've got 3 or 4 people who are either working or, at school, and it just doesn't cut it. And lots of sleep lost over that. And I know that in our own case, just before the holidays, our internet was always spotty at best. And so, you know, my husband finally got on it, and over the Christmas holidays, we had someone come in and upgrade everything. And thank God we did, because if we hadn't, I wouldn't be on this call right now, I don't think.
Right.
Then,
Well, I
and-
mean, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
go ahead.
sorry. I was just gonna say we have to color code. We have color coded things visually, like in the kitchen, right? I mean, we're all digital electronic beings now, but we have a visual cue in the kitchen. These are synchronous lectures for the girls, right? Where they need to be online. These are, so I try to work my schedule around that as well when I'm booking calls, or I'll make sure that it's a phone call, like it's a with video off, just to help with the streaming service, right? So that it isn't quite that we're not lagging. But there are definitely spots. It just boggles the mind in a way where we live. We're in southern Ontario, in Niagara, so close to the border, all the infrastructure that we have in place. And yet, right, so where I am, if I drive a kilometer, you know, into the country, go down Effingham there, and then there's the dead zone, right?
Yeah.
It's just,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Scott, we had the conversation with the group when we were talking about the real estate market here in Niagara. And I think it was Barb Scarlett who was saying that, you know, people will come, they'll buy a beautiful home, and then they realize they have no internet. And they're, you know, many of them are coming from the GTA. And it's like, not, they would never dream of asking, well, you know, is there, you know, can I get internet? It's,
Yeah, well, I think one thing on the internet front too, because you have to get the greatest, most powerful broadband you can get when you have all these things running from your home. And Zoom calls appear to take up more bandwidth than, like, say, Teams or Google. I find when I'm working at home, Zoom is always dicey. That's why I usually come to the office for these. And maybe Alou or Carolyn, you can speak to this, but I know when our T4s came out with our group recently, it came with a package that said, hey, it's tax time, and most of you are going to have to start writing off working from home and internet and phone and all that. And the other thing that people are missing, and another reason that I like to come to the office, is ergonomics. Working on your sofa is not good for the neck. Or, you know, I was like, oh, I have an island kitchen, this is going to be perfect. Well, that lasted until my feet went to sleep sitting on those stools, and I was like, well, this doesn't work. So, I mean, is that something that you're facing with you know, with clients and stuff? Maybe Lou, we'll start with you, like, where people are going, what do I do now? Like, you know, in terms of taxes and write-offs and all that, like, it's a whole different mindset.
Well, for me, I you know, a little unique because I've always worked from, but I want to speak about just what, you know, the conversation was around on the internet. One thing I have realized, what a true monopoly it is, and what an essential service Cogeco and Bell have been. And I'll tell you why, because I've had pretty good internet. I pay for the upgrades. I'm 116, you know, all day long. And although I live in the cusp of Fonthill Welland, where you don't get any other service really than what you get. And they were fixing the road. And what did they do? Because there are no locates for Cogeco, they cut the wire. Right? They cut the wire in the middle of COVID, in the heightened, I'm going nowhere, and I have staff here. And it takes the company 1 week to come and patch the cables. So I begged the city of Pelham. I said, listen, you cut it, you put it together, whatever you have to do, like, just fix it. And they did this patchwork, and then they dug it in and broke it again 3 days later. And I'm thinking, okay, well, we're on a podcast, so I can't tell you what I was thinking, but I will say that I was out there, and my engineer neighbor and my husband, and we were trying to patch this thing up together, you know, and by the time they came, I'm thinking, if I had waited, it was so profound what an essential service this now is, right? Because how do you conduct business? But to speak to what you're saying, Scott, with the write-offs and everything, I mean, I've always had, this is my business address, but for a lot of people, the government was giving out, I think it was up to, I believe, $200 or $400 a month that you can write off for all these additional expenses that you're incurring. But the truth of the matter is you're incurring a lot more. And the reason you're incurring a lot more is you're using a lot more hydro. You're using a lot more gas. You have to, you know, you're doing laundry when you can. Your lifestyle has changed too much. There is an expense to working from home. But what some companies have done is much like mileage to compensate, right? You pay for the mileage, but now you're not paying for the mileage. So the allocation for the mileage has been given to, okay, work from home, because I think that I don't believe that we have enough funding within the granting system to really, say to people, you weren't prepared for this. We were going to take on all these costs. Now you are. And so companies have sort of compensated for that. And I do that with my staff because it's, I give them the computers, but I know it's their electricity, it's their time, everything I would have paid for, right? So what the government isn't supplementing, certain businesses are, because they would have anyway if people had to travel.
Right. Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah, it makes a difference for both sides. Carolyn, how's that adjustment been for you?
Well, interestingly enough, I think just in the last couple of days, so I really am fortunate because I work for a larger business, because I work for one of the largest employers in Niagara with post-secondary, right? So Niagara College has, there are experts who put all this information together for us. We have, a health and safety expert at the college who does ergonomic assessments. So obviously that was happening within within our office spaces at work, but then we were having adjustments, to, a certain type of chair, adjustments of monitors and things like that were happening before COVID. And then we very quickly realized with certain people, we needed to put in place a way to get those pieces of equipment to their homes. So we've allowed that in order to set up, right? Because we were a culture previously of, you must come to the office to do your work, to complete your work. So to Alu's point, and we were talking about this earlier about the trust, right? There's just you're expected to be in your office. And then when that was taken away from you, you were expected to be able to still do your work at home, but to the point of feet falling asleep or back issues or things like that, how can you how can you concentrate and be productive when you don't have that infrastructure in place? So we, quickly started within our own department, started an inventory and allowed people to come in, in a safe manner. We have all kinds of things in place at the college because there are still employees going into work. There are still classes taking place on campus, right? Lab, the applied learning piece of post-secondary, right? How you don't want to learn construction at home, right? You want to be in a supervised space, or the brewmaster program. Let's face it, right? Cannabis, right? You need to be on campus for some of these things. So we have all this health and safety protocol in place. So being able to safely come to campus, pick up those pieces of equipment and bring them home, and then for us on the other end tracking it to make sure that our employees, right, monitors at a certain height, because you're to look at a laptop all day. Not to have the double screens when you're crunching a lot of numbers. It's just things that are, so in the beginning, a lot of us were kind of, let's see how long, I can do this for a little while, right? We're a year into it almost. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny because a year ago, March, when transitioned all my stuff to my home, in my office, I have a nice, comfy leather chair with an ottoman, and I thought, you know what, this is perfect. I've got a nice little side table with a lamp. I'm gonna set up my lap table on my laptop on my lap, and I'm gonna be, super comfortable. And I did that for a couple of weeks, and I woke up one morning and I couldn't walk. It's like, oh my God, I've thrown out my back. And my husband was like, well, what have you done? Like, what have you done? It's like, nothing, I've done nothing. And it occurred to me, well, it's sitting in that super comfy, soft chair with my feet up and, sitting there for 4 hours at a time. So I got smart and, I'm at my desk and doing what I should have been doing from the beginning. But you're right. Like, who could have thought that this would be, this long of a process? Yeah, a couple weeks, going to be as comfortable as I can. This is heaven, and no way. I want to talk about an article that Forbes published end of December, and they talked about the future of remote work in 2021. And They said that by 2025, an estimated 70% of the workforce would be working remotely at least 5 days a month.
Mhm.
I found that really interesting. They also said that the percentage of workers permanently working from home is expected to double in 2021. So I think this change is something that's going to be permanent in some way. And I know that from my own experience, working from home at first was not into it at all. It was just really stressful. But after having conversations with people like Mike on a regular basis and others, I've really found ways to make it work for me. And what I've found is that I'm much more productive working from home. And it's because I don't have the distractions. Again, I'm lucky. I have an office that I physically go to. I close the door and nobody disturbs me. But I'm finding that, I have hours of uninterrupted time that I would never have in the office. And so when I think of, when we get back to whatever our new normal is and we're able to go back into the office, I'm already thinking, for me to stay on top of everything and to maintain that balance, I'm probably going to want to continue to work from home a day a week or two, depending on what I've got going on, because I'm working better. Does that make sense? Does anybody else feel that way?
So I think it's extremely interesting, and I was going to kind of bring this up earlier, but we've circled back around to it. We were talking about the Zoom calls and how the chit chat, right, doesn't happen. I think it's when we're working from home or we're on a Zoom call, you're much more aware about stealing time, right? So when you're on a Zoom call, you almost feel guilty if there's 8 other people looking at you and you're talking about your weekend, right? Like Carolyn, you mentioned that you guys schedule an 1.5-hour meeting so that you can schedule in the chit chat. Well, you become way more aware of, I just stole a 1/2 hour from my day, right? Where when you're at home, if you're stealing time, like you go sit on the couch and watch a show for a 1/2 hour. Well, 10 minutes in, you're like, I should be doing something productive. Like, this is ridiculous. Where when you're in an office situation, you steal a 1/2 hour and 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there, 15 minutes there, and you don't feel guilty about it because it's just the cadence of the day, right? Like, just these things happen. Where when you're working from home, you're just so aware of, I'm really not doing what I should be doing right now. And I find that guilt creeps in, right? So there is a balance, as you're suggesting. Like, I don't know that everyone can handle the kind of the solitude of working from home and continuing to be motivated enough to do that. So I don't know that it will transition completely this way, but what I think's happened in the last 10 months is that there was probably all kinds of businesses that looked at this as their future, right? We have this big office space. We don't probably need this big office space, but we're really afraid to leave what we've always done because we don't know what's going to happen. Well, we just got slammed in the face and it was like, well, this is what we're doing. And, I think it's removed for a lot of businesses that fear of that change. And we're gonna adopt or adapt, and then I guess adopt a new work style that will be some sort of hybrid, right? That will force you to do more of what we're doing now, but integrate some of the other pieces that we had in our traditional kind of work setup.
If I may weigh in to what you both are saying, there's it's very interesting because you're both talking about how productive you are and you're conscious about stealing time and all that stuff, right? But there's a disconnect that we shouldn't take for granted, and the disconnect is the seeing is believing syndrome. So as a business owner, you as people working in the workforce will say, I know my integrity and I know how much I'm putting in and I'm doing more time. Like Carolyn said, she's putting in more, it just is, right? Because you're like, I have so much time on my hands and I'm going boom, 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 and I don't have to drive anywhere. Well, there's a disconnect a little bit because from an employer standpoint, if you're not running your own business, they have to re-engage their trust relationship with their employees, because what's happening that I've seen is that employers are questioning the employees more because they're not at home, and that is not great for employee engagement or motivation. However, if there was a competence trust when they were in the office and you knew they could do the job, why are you doubting without evidence that they can do it? It's this thing we have, right? If you can't see it, it's not existing. And I think that's becoming a bit of a challenge on how to motivate employees, because inadvertently, without business owners meaning to, they're now questioning your integrity out of the workplace. Now, for Carolyn, like, yeah, it's Niagara College. I'm an adjunct professor there. It's never been questioned. I mean, because there are measurables everywhere, and my, like you said, labs are going on now. And my husband works in the culinary lab at Niagara College. But for those working from home in small to medium-sized businesses, is where the ambiguity comes in. In larger corporations, and you know, you have measurables for everything. But I think that it's important to note in this conversation that when employees are saying, or people are saying, I am more productive at home, that trust relationship of this interpersonal relationship you have with your employee gets reestablished to the new norm for now, right? Because if not, it derails the relationship, and the next thing you know, what you were fearing is actually happening inadvertently.
Yeah, I think, you know, for us, it's proof is in the pudding. Like we are,
Yeah.
for us, we're busier than, sorry, we're busier than we ever were. So, you know, we've put out more programming in 2020 than we did in 2019 with less resources. And so to me, I don't care, you know, how many hours they work. If they get all of the work done at the level that I need it done in 5 hours, God bless them. I just want the work done at the level that we need it done at. And if that's happening, the rest of it doesn't matter to me, right?
Exactly. But if everybody was like you, I'd be out of business.
Oh, okay. Well then, let's not talk about that.
I think it's to your point. It's visual in many respects, right? When you see
Yes.
when you see your folks, you know, day after day, and while you know they're doing what they're supposed to be doing at the end of the week, because you can see numbers or whatever. When they're in a hoodie or a ball cap or half, you know, slouched on their sofa or wherever they happen to be perched at that given time, you have to really force yourself to wrap your head around the fact that, you know, well, not lazy bum, you know, not that I would be doing it any differently, but it's like, couldn't you put a shirt on today, sort of thing? Because, and it shouldn't matter. Maybe it should. I don't know, but it feels that way, right? Certainly from a management point of view, sometimes you're like, really, this is the best you got this morning, and it, you know, so it's a visual thing, totally.
Yeah, that's true. And, you know, Scott, we talked a little bit about it last week when we had our discussion around the mental health piece of this pandemic. And, you know, a few of us talked about how we've kept the same routines. And so for me, and I said, I'm going to kick myself when this is over, but I get up at the same time, and I, you know, get dressed for work. And even though I might be wearing yoga pants, I'm ready for work. I put on my makeup, I do my hair, brush my teeth. I do all of that, because for me up here, maintaining that routine is important. But for some people, it's not important. And I get what you're saying. You know, you tune into some of these Zoom calls, and it's like, oh, wow, you realize you're on camera, right? So interesting. Yeah.
Kind of go back to your point, Dolores. What do we need at the end of the day? What do we need? And then, so what do we need as employers? And then what do our employees need as well, right? Because to your point, and to the point about mental health and things like that too, right? Like I have a certain expectation. We've had expectations of, you know, being up at a certain time, being dressed at a certain time, being this, But then there are certainly people who are going to make choices just because that's them. But then there are people who don't have a choice. So I have, an employee, we have a few, staff members, and they were doing their work between 5 and 7 a.m. So I was getting emails, getting pings and things like that. I mean, for a long time, I don't put my phone by my bed, or I've never done that kind of thing, right? It's always charging in another room so that it's off, right? And, and then a day or two into it, she said, by the way, between my husband and I, we have to schedule, we're both working from home, but our kids are both home and they're on synchronous learning now. Last spring, when everything went crazy, it was, tune at a certain time, here are the things to do at home. You parents walk your kids through it. So it would be a lunchtime, or it would be an evening, or it would be around your work hours. But now it became, in January with the lockdown, it became the other way around. So she was still being productive, amazingly productive, between 5 and 7 a.m. and sending me a whole bunch of questions, that I would, when I got on, right? So we just have to, at the end of the day, what is the work that needs to get done? Is it being done to the degree that it needs to be done? And are we also communicating all that time? What is it you need from us? What can we put in place, right? Having that open conversation, being able, as much as possible, there are employees who don't want to be on Zoom calls. They don't want to be on camera. They don't feel comfortable that way. So are we allowing that? Are we being flexible? Well, I think this whole year has proved, flexibility. We kept saying pivot. We hate the word pivot, right? Flexibility is right up there as well.
It's
like
the
that.
adaptive leadership we were talking about right before. People have to be adaptive now. It's modern leadership, right? And this is not new, guys. Like from the 1800s, the moment society changed, the businesses had to follow, otherwise chaos would ensue. There's a disconnect. It's just one of those times, right? Something so profound has happened in society that the expectations in the workplace have to adjust to it. Otherwise, there will be a disconnect, and there will be discourse, and there will be chaos as we're trying to find our feet. It just is. It's always been. I think it's unique that it's a pandemic, but quite frankly, when the plague happened, it was unique for them too, right? But we have to adjust with the times. And who knows what the next 5 years are, who knows what it's going to look like? That's why it's people are always encouraged, like, shorten your long-term goals, because we don't know what long-term means. Like what's going to happen next year this time, Dolores? Are we going to be in a cafe hanging out? I mean, you don't know, right?
Right.
Well, and I think one of the things is that people, Scott, I actually used this on our call earlier today, that people are always striving for a comfort level, right? So you get comfortable with the way you do your job, the work setting, and we become uncomfortable with change in that, right? So we're always constantly searching for that comfort level. And I think now is all about becoming comfortable with being uncomfortable, right? Yeah. Like things are just going to change. So, and whether you're a manager or and you have a big giant team, or you're a part of a team, we all strive for some comfort level. And I know as a manager, like when I had a team of sales reps, like when you didn't see them on a daily basis, it was, you felt like you were missing one of those checkpoints. Well, was that checkpoint really necessary, or was it just that's what I was used to in the role?
Yeah, you make such a good point. I know we have to wrap up, Scott. I'm going to throw it over to you in a minute, but I think for us at the chamber anyways, we had to look at how we were doing everything, because everything was very social. All of our learning was in person. All of our networking was in person. All of our big events, like everything we did, we had to be flexible and really flip it completely. And so we didn't do anything the same. And, that has been very exciting to me, because when you're running a program or running an operation, it's very easy to get comfortable and do the same things in the same way, and sure, you tweak a little bit, but to really do that major flip is almost impossible. And that's exactly what we've had to do. So that's a good thing that has come out of this. We've really had to look at things in a completely different way. And that's been very exciting for us in the work that we do. Scott, I'm gonna turn it over to you. I think you might have one final question for everyone. Not sure.
I don't know. I guess if there's a final question, it would just be any lasting tips for the working at home environment for those of you who have done it for some time, and Carolyn, from you who's transitioned. What would be your words of wisdom at this point?
I don't know. I could give you, some rules, and, everyone's seen, we've had different podcasts and things like that. But I think based on the conversation today, I have to say, do what makes you feel comfortable. Right? No. Put yourself in a position where you feel like you've got wins, right? As you're, because everything is, you feel like you're struggling against, but, I'm sitting in the living room. I'm near the best Wi-Fi spot. I figured out the schedule with my the other adults in my household to be able to be productive. I don't necessarily get up at the same time as I used to when I had to go into the office. I'll tell you that. But I still get my work done at the end of the day. So, and I still most days feel productive and happy with what I'm doing in the circumstances.
Okay. Alu?
For me, it's, let's have the conversation. Let's set expectations. Let's realign. So don't stop anything, just realign it. Realign it to what works for the business, what works for the client, what works for yourself personally, because that realignment will produce much more productivity than not having the conversation. And I think a word of wisdom is don't stop talking. Talk about what's relevant though. Make it purposeful, do it by design. All of us are dealing with this by circumstance. Some have gotten ahead of the curve, then designed it, and some haven't, right? So let's purposefully design what works for all of us.
Excellent. Okay. Mike?
Yeah, I think that this is a spectacular question because I think that we're all still trying to find that sweet spot in these workspaces, right? Whether you're used to, like for me, like I said, I haven't worked out of a home base. I'm often on the road and more mobile, and that changed, right? So I think, as Lou and Carolyn both suggested, it's understanding that things are different, understanding that there's going to be challenges, accepting that it's not going to be the way it's always been, and stop chasing that comfort, and just try to figure out what works best for you. If it's like Dolores getting dressed in the morning so that you feel like you're off to work, if it's, well, I never dreamed it'd be so awesome to be able to work in track pants. If that's what it is for you, then that's what it is. I think it's just finding a comfort level for yourself. And then Carolyn, you I think it's the $1 million statement. It's finding enjoyment and pride, and feeling purposeful. You use some different words, but I think that at the end of the day, feeling like you've accomplished something and taking pride in that, I think that that's the one thing that is a bit of a challenge maybe for people from working from home, because everything kind of blends together. You don't leave your work and come home to a different world. You're still in that same world. So somehow finding and appreciating the work that you've done and feeling like you've accomplished something, taking that from your day, I think is maybe the tip. I don't know. I haven't been able to put my finger on it, because it's not an easy answer. It's something that does change, and evolves as we're all in this situation, I guess. So that wasn't a very concise answer or a simple answer. But I don't think it's a simple situation. We weren't meant to get here as quickly as we've gotten here. So I think everybody's just figuring it out.
Absolutely. Well, I know I get a lot of, and Mike, maybe you're responsible for this, but I seem to get an awful lot of ads on my social media feed for ergonomic chairs. So I don't know if you've sold that. I don't know how that works, but I seem to get that an awful lot.
The advertising magic. So you're seeing the advertising magic in work.
I guess so. Mike Cressman from Cressman Agency, Carolyn Mullin, who's the Associate Director of Strategic Partnerships at Niagara College, and Lou McCabe from Trusted Time. Thank you. We are out of time, but that was an amazing conversation. Dolores?
All right. Well, yeah, thank you. Again, another great conversation. Scott, I'm learning so much and gathering so many great tips that I'm going to implement myself. And you know what? I think maybe Monday morning might be my day to work in pajamas. I'm going to try. I'm going to try. We'll see. I'll let you know how it goes. Next week, we'll be talking to some of our local restaurant owners to discuss how they're doing and where they see their industry growing. It's been a tough go for them, really hard hit industry. Joining us for the conversation will be Kevin Eshlin from the Smoking Buddha, Cheryl LaPalme from Ye Olde Squire, and Doug Chipman from Chip and Charlie's. To all of our listeners, send us the topics that you're talking about because we want to talk about them too. Thanks again for tuning in, and everyone have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.